When Jaguar Wright opened her mouth this time, it wasn't during a press interview or a controlled sit-down. It was raw, unscripted, and immediately controversial. Within minutes, clips were circulating across social media, stripped of context, replayed with bold captions, and framed as another explosive moment from someone who has become known for saying what others refuse to touch. But this time the reaction felt different. Louder, sharper, more divided, because the name at the center of her comments was Teyana Taylor. Jaguar didn't present documents, she didn't show proof, she didn't release a list. What she did was make sweeping claims, delivered with conviction, implying that there were hidden truths surrounding people in the industry, and that certain narratives had been protected for far too long.
Ex-husband, she made him the bad guy. The divorce would have never even been out if he didn't file the motion to use our full and legal names. Then she had to go and she had to get new energy. What was she calling him? Her apple pies? Have you seen my apple pies? Did you see my apple pie? Oh my God, you did a love scene with Leonardo DiCaprio.
How was it shooting those scenes with Leo?
It was just
That implication alone was enough to ignite chaos. In today's internet culture, implication travels faster than evidence, and certainty of tone is often mistaken for certainty of fact. Almost instantly, timelines split into two camps. One side treated Jaguar's words as overdue truth, arguing that she has been warning people about the entertainment industry for years. The other side pushed back hard, accusing her of recklessness, clout chasing, and crossing ethical lines by dragging a well-known figure into vague but damaging narratives. The debate wasn't about what was proven. It was about what people wanted to believe. What made this moment especially volatile was Jaguar's history. She is not new to controversy. Over time, she has built a reputation for making extreme claims about celebrities, power structures, and behind-the-scenes behavior in Hollywood. Some of her past statements have later aligned loosely with public revelations. Others have been widely criticized as unsubstantiated or harmful. That mixed record makes every new claim she makes instantly polarizing. People don't wait to verify, they choose sides. In this case, Jaguar framed her comments as part of a much larger pattern. She suggested that the public image of certain celebrities does not match private realities, and that silence within the industry has allowed questionable behavior to remain unchecked. Importantly, she did not present her words as legal accusations. She presented them as warnings, wrapped in emotion, frustration, and a sense of moral urgency. That framing matters because it gives her room to speak without proving, while still leaving reputational damage in its wake. For Teyana Taylor, the situation escalated without her saying a single word. She did not respond publicly. She did not issue a denial. She did not acknowledge the claims at all. But in the court of public opinion, silence rarely pauses a story. It accelerates it. Fans and critics alike began dissecting her past interviews, lyrics, appearances, and associations, searching for meaning where none had been previously assigned. The internet did what it always does when confronted with ambiguity. It filled the gaps. Reaction channels labeled the situation as an expose. Comment sections debated whether Jaguar should be believed. Some argued that even repeating such claims was irresponsible. Others insisted that uncomfortable conversations are necessary to challenge powerful systems. The story quickly stopped being about what was actually said and became about what it might mean. What's crucial to understand here is that no verified list exists. No confirmed victims were named. No evidence was presented. Yet the damage of implication does not require confirmation to be felt. In celebrity culture, association alone can shift perception. Once a name is pulled into a controversial narrative, even unfairly, it becomes attached to it in search results, comment sections, and public memory. Another layer that intensified the reaction was the language used online. Words like exposed, infected, and list began appearing in captions, even when those words did not accurately reflect what Jaguar actually said. This is how narratives mutate. A vague claim becomes a concrete accusation once it passes through enough retellings. Each repost sharpens the language to gain clicks, not clarity. This is where responsibility gets blurred. Jaguar spoke emotionally, but the internet amplified selectively. People who never watched the full clip reacted to headlines alone. Outrage and defense both spread faster than context. And in the middle of it all was a public figure who did not choose to enter the conversation but was pulled into it regardless. The most dangerous part of moments like this isn't the initial statement. It's the ecosystem that follows. Algorithms reward outrage, certainty outperforms caution, And once a story is framed as an expose, walking it back becomes almost impossible, even if the foundation was shaky from the start. This isn't a story about proven facts. It's a story about influence, perception, and how easily reputations can be dragged into chaos by suggestion alone. Jaguar Wright didn't need to prove anything to start a firestorm. She only needed to speak with confidence in a space already primed for distrust. And as the clips continued to circulate, one question became unavoidable. At what point does speaking your truth become reckless when it involves other people's names? And who pays the price when the internet decides implication is enough? This is where the story really begins, not with proof, not with confirmation, but with the collision of accusation culture, online amplification, and silence from the person at the center of it all. To understand why this moment exploded the way it did, you have to understand the people involved, not just the words that were said. Jaguar Wright is not just a name that trends randomly. She is a figure built on contradiction. To some, she is a truth-teller who refuses to play industry politics. To others, she is reckless, unpredictable, and dangerous with her platform. That split perception is exactly why every statement she makes instantly divides the room. Jaguar comes from a music era where access was limited and gatekeeping was real. She has spoken repeatedly about feeling silenced, pushed out, and discarded by an industry she believes protects power at all costs. Over time, that resentment hardened into something sharper. Her delivery became angrier, her claims broader, her language more absolute. And yet, every time she speaks, people listen, not because they trust everything she says, but because they fear there might be truth buried somewhere inside it. Her supporters argue that history has proven the industry capable of hiding uncomfortable realities. They point to past scandals that were once dismissed as conspiracy, but later confirmed. That belief fuels Jaguar's credibility for a specific audience, not because she proves things, but because she challenges comfort. In their eyes, her willingness to say names is bravery, not recklessness. On the other side is Teyana Taylor, a completely different type of public figure. Teyana's brand has always been built on control, artistry, and intentional image. She curates how she is seen, she speaks when she chooses. She exits conversations when they no longer serve her. That discipline has earned her respect across music, fashion, and film spaces. She is viewed as someone who understands the game and navigates it carefully. That contrast matters. When someone like Jaguar, who operates in chaos and confrontation, brings up someone like Teyana, who operates in silence and structure, the collision feels jarring. It disrupts expectations. People don't associate Teyana with scandal or mess. They associate her with professionalism, boundaries, and creative focus. That's why her name landing in Jaguar's orbit felt so explosive. Another reason this clash resonated is because of silence versus noise. Jaguar fills space loudly, Teyana leaves it empty, and empty space online is uncomfortable. Audiences rush to fill it with interpretation. When Jaguar speaks aggressively and Teyana says nothing, the imbalance feels dramatic, even if it's not intentional. One side feels active, the other feels passive, and in internet storytelling, action dominates. What made this even more intense was the way fans projected motives onto both women. Some framed Jaguar as exposing what others are too afraid to say. Others framed her as attacking a woman who has done nothing publicly to warrant suspicion. Meanwhile, Teyana's silence was interpreted in conflicting ways. Some saw it as dignity, others saw it as avoidance. Neither interpretation was confirmed, but both traveled widely. This is where character engagement really takes over. Jaguar is seen as unpredictable, emotional, and volatile. Teyana is seen as composed, strategic, and controlled. Those archetypes are powerful. They turn real people into symbols. Jaguar becomes the whistleblower. Teyana becomes the protected one. Once those roles are assigned, facts struggle to compete with narrative. It's also important to note how gender and power play into perception. When women speak angrily, they are often dismissed as unstable. When women remain silent, they are often accused of hiding something. Both roles come with judgment. Jaguar's emotion is used to question her credibility. Teyana's silence is used to question her transparency. Neither position offers safety in the public eye. As the story spread, fans began choosing which character they believed rather than what was proven. Loyalty replaced logic. People aligned with Jaguar because they distrust the industry. Others defended Teyana because they distrust unverified claims. This wasn't a debate about evidence. It was a debate about worldview, and that's why this moment stuck. It wasn't just about what was said. It was about who said it, who it was said about, and what each of them represents to different audiences. Jaguar represents disruption. Teyana represents control. When disruption targets control, chaos follows. By the end of this phase, the story had evolved again. It was no longer about a claim. It was about credibility, about who deserves belief, about whether the industry protects its own or destroys its critics. And those are questions people bring their own answers to long before they hear the full story. This is the tension that drives everything forward. Not facts versus lies, but belief versus disbelief. And once a story becomes about belief, it becomes almost impossible to contain. By the time most people reacted to this controversy, they weren't reacting to what Jaguar Wright actually said. They were reacting to what the internet turned it into. That distinction is everything. Because when you slow the clips down and remove the captions, a different picture starts to emerge. One that is still controversial, still inflammatory, but far less concrete than viral headlines suggested. Jaguar did not present a verified list. She did not provide documents. She did not name confirmed victims. What she did was speak in broad, emotionally charged language about what she believes are hidden behaviors and protected narratives within the entertainment industry. She framed her comments as warnings and personal convictions, not as legal claims. That nuance matters, but nuance is the first thing to disappear once content starts traveling. The moment her words hit social media, they were repackaged aggressively. Short clips were cropped to remove context. Captions added words she never used. The phrase "infected" appeared repeatedly in headlines and thumbnails, even though that framing came from commentary channels and reposts, not from direct, verifiable statements. This is how a story escalates from allegation to accusation without anyone officially making one. Language is powerful, especially when it shifts responsibility. Jaguar's original tone suggested suspicion and belief. The internet transformed that into certainty. A statement of opinion became an implied fact once it passed through enough retellings. Each repost sharpened the claim, not to increase accuracy but to increase clicks. Ambiguity doesn't trend, absolutes do. Another critical shift happened when people stopped distinguishing between Jaguar believes and this is true. That line collapsed quickly. Viewers who only saw headlines never heard the disclaimers or emotional framing. They absorbed the most extreme version of the story because that version was easiest to understand. Complexity requires attention. Outrage does not. This is where Teyana Taylor became fully trapped in the narrative without participating in it. She did not address the claims. She did not respond to Jaguar. She did not acknowledge the online chaos, but silence does not stop distortion. It creates space for others to speak on your behalf, often irresponsibly. Reaction channels filled that space immediately. Some claimed Jaguar was finally exposing what others were too afraid to say. Others accused her of targeting a high-profile woman because controversy equals relevance. Very few paused to ask what was actually proven. The conversation became about belief systems, not verification. The most dangerous part of this mutation wasn't Jaguar's words themselves. It was how confidently strangers spoke for her. Commentators presented their interpretations as summaries. Thumbnails screamed conclusions that were never reached. Once those visuals spread, corrections became irrelevant. Most viewers never returned to check accuracy. They remember the first version they saw. This phenomenon highlights a deeper problem with internet storytelling. Responsibility gets diluted. Jaguar can claim she never said certain things. Channels can claim they were just reporting. Audiences can claim they were just reacting. And yet reputational harm still occurs. No single actor feels accountable, but the impact is cumulative. Another layer that intensified the mutation was existing distrust in the entertainment industry. Many people already believe Hollywood hides damaging truths. That belief primed audiences to accept extreme interpretations without skepticism. When a claim aligns with what someone already suspects, it feels true, even without evidence. Confirmation bias did the rest. As the narrative hardened, people stopped asking, "Did this happen?" and started asking, "Why is this being hidden?" That shift is subtle but critical. Once the assumption becomes concealment rather than possibility, every lack of confirmation is reframed as proof of a cover-up. Silence becomes suspicious. Denials become strategic. There is no winning position left for the person being discussed. At this point, the story was no longer about Jaguar's credibility or Teyana's actions. It was about the internet's appetite for scandal and how easily language can be weaponized. A warning became an expose. A belief became a list, a suggestion became a verdict, and none of those transformations required new information. What's especially important is that many viewers who participated in the outrage never consumed the original content at all. They reacted to reactions. This echo chamber effect magnifies distortion. Each layer adds certainty while removing context. By the time the story reaches its widest audience, it barely resembles its source. This is how reputations get damaged in modern media, not through court cases or confirmed reporting, but through viral misrepresentation. Once a narrative reaches this stage, walking it back becomes nearly impossible. Even if clarifications appear later, they never travel as far as the initial shock. By the end of this phase, the story had crossed a line. It moved from controversial speech into a cautionary example of how quickly implication turns into accusation online. Jaguar's words became secondary, the internet's version became dominant, and that's where the real danger lies. Not in one person speaking emotionally, but in millions of others repeating something more extreme than what was ever said. Once the story reached critical mass, it stopped being about what was said and became about who people chose to believe. This is the phase where nuance dies. The internet doesn't sit with uncertainty for long. It organizes chaos into sides, and once sides are formed, everything becomes personal. Supporters and critics of Jaguar Wright didn't just disagree, they went to war. On one side were those who saw Jaguar as a necessary disruptor. To them, her history of speaking out against the entertainment industry gave her credibility, not because she proved every claim, but because she challenged comfort. They argued that outrage against her proved her point. If the industry wasn't hiding anything, why were people reacting so defensively? In their view, backlash was evidence of suppression, not recklessness. On the other side were fans and defenders of Teyana, who saw the entire situation as irresponsible and dangerous. They argued that vague claims tied to a real person's name crossed a moral line, especially when no evidence was provided. For them, this wasn't truth-telling. It was character assassination disguised as commentary. And the more the claims mutated online, the angrier this group became. What made the divide especially volatile was that both sides believed they were protecting something important. One side believed they were protecting truth, the other believed they were protecting a person. That difference matters because it explains why neither side was willing to slow down. Truth seekers don't want restraint. Defenders don't want ambiguity. The internet rewarded both extremes. As the backlash grew, Jaguar's past resurfaced aggressively. Old interviews, previous claims, and controversial moments were reposted and reframed as either proof of her consistency or proof of her instability. The same clips were used to argue opposite conclusions. That's the danger of selective memory online. History becomes a weapon, not a lesson. At the same time, Teyana's silence was pulled into the storm. Her refusal to respond publicly was no longer seen as neutrality. It became a Rorschach test. Supporters saw strength and discipline. Critics saw avoidance. Commentators spoke on her behalf, assigning motives she never confirmed. In a space driven by outrage, silence doesn't protect you. It invites projection. This is where the internet crossed into its most dangerous role. It stopped reacting and started adjudicating. Comment sections read like verdicts. People spoke with absolute certainty about events they could not verify. Careers, reputations, and personal lives were discussed as if they were fictional plotlines rather than real consequences. The line between commentary and harm blurred completely. Reaction channels capitalized on the chaos. Each new video raised the stakes, using stronger language, darker thumbnails, and more definitive conclusions. The story became a content engine. Whether Jaguar was right or wrong became secondary to whether the topic could still generate clicks. Outrage was monetized, caution was invisible. Another factor that escalated the backlash was moral positioning. People didn't just disagree, they questioned each other's values. Supporting Jaguar meant being accused of enabling harm. Defending Teyana meant being accused of protecting the industry. These accusations hardened identities. Once moral identity is involved, people stop listening. They defend their side at all costs. What's often overlooked in moments like this is that neither side truly knows the full truth. Yet the certainty with which people spoke made it feel like a trial had already taken place. Evidence was replaced with repetition. Doubt was replaced with belief, and belief, once shared widely enough, became social fact. This phase also revealed how little accountability exists online. Jaguar could say her words were misinterpreted. Channels could say they were just reacting, viewers could say they were just sharing, but no one could undo the harm once the narrative took hold. Responsibility was scattered so thin that it effectively disappeared. By now, the original claim was almost irrelevant. The story was about credibility, loyalty, and power. Who gets to speak, who gets believed, who gets protected, and who pays the price when accusations, real or perceived, go viral. The internet didn't wait for clarification. It didn't ask for evidence. It didn't pause to consider impact. It decided. And once a decision is made at scale, reversing it becomes nearly impossible. This is the moment where stories stop being informational and start being cautionary. Not about the people involved, but about the system that consumed them. A system where outrage travels faster than truth, where implication is enough to convict, and where silence offers no shield. The final phase of this story isn't louder, it's quieter, it's about aftermath. About what remains once the noise fades and the damage lingers. Because the internet moves on quickly, but reputations don't recover on the same timeline. When the outrage finally slowed, nothing actually felt resolved. The clips stopped trending, reaction videos slowed down, comment sections moved on to the next controversy, but the damage didn't disappear with the noise. It settled quietly exactly where viral stories do the most harm, in memory. In association, in search results. This is the part of the story the internet never stays around for because it isn't entertaining, it's uncomfortable. For Jaguar Wright, the aftermath looked familiar. Another moment where she was either praised as fearless or dismissed as dangerous. Another wave of people saying she was finally telling the truth, and another wave saying she had gone too far. But what changed this time was scale. Her words didn't just spark debate, they created collateral damage far beyond her control. Whether she intended that or not no longer mattered. Impact replaced intent. Jaguar exists in a strange space in public culture. She is not treated as a journalist, yet her words are consumed like reporting. She is not treated as entertainment, yet her clips are monetized as content. That contradiction allows her to speak without accountability while still causing real-world consequences. When things go wrong, blame spreads outward instead of inward. She can say she was misunderstood. The internet can say it was just reacting, and the system moves on without correcting itself. For Teyana Taylor, the cost was quieter but heavier. She never entered the conversation, yet she became inseparable from it. Her name was pulled into narratives she did not create, framed by words she did not use, and attached to implications she never confirmed. Even silence did not protect her. In fact, it became another tool for interpretation. This is the cruel reality of modern fame. You don't have to participate to be consumed. Once your name becomes content, control disappears. Silence gets read as strategy. Privacy gets framed as avoidance. And the absence of denial gets twisted into confirmation by people who were never owed an explanation in the first place. What makes this especially troubling is how easily the internet justified its behavior. Many people said they were just asking questions. Others claimed they were just sharing clips. Some argued that if nothing was true, it would have been addressed. This logic shifts responsibility onto the person being discussed, not the people spreading the narrative. It turns restraint into liability. This story exposes a deeper problem with outrage culture. We pretend we care about truth, but what we really reward is certainty. Even false certainty feels better than ambiguity. Once the internet decides what it believes, it doesn't wait for confirmation. It builds a reality around that belief and punishes anyone who disrupts it. Another uncomfortable truth is how quickly moral lines blur when entertainment is involved. Claims that would be considered unacceptable in real life become shareable when framed as exposes. Language gets harsher because harshness performs better. Words that carry serious implications are used casually because clicks are more valuable than caution. And when things go too far, no one takes responsibility. The speaker says they were misinterpreted. The platforms say they're neutral. The audience says they were reacting. Harm becomes everyone's fault and no one's accountability. This is where the story stops being about Jaguar Wright or Teyana Taylor specifically. It becomes about a system that encourages implication without evidence, amplification without verification, and outrage without consequence. A system where reputations are treated as disposable and silence is treated as suspicious. The most dangerous part isn't that people believed something unproven, it's how confidently they spoke as if it were settled. How easily language like exposed and confirmed replaced claimed and alleged. How quickly humanity disappeared behind usernames and thumbnails. Once the noise fades, what remains is a warning, not about celebrities. About us, about what happens when we reward the loudest voices instead of the most responsible ones. When we choose entertainment over empathy. When we treat real people like plot devices in stories we don't have to live with. This story didn't need proof to cause harm, it only needed momentum. And momentum is something the internet generates effortlessly. So here's the final question, the one that actually matters. At what point does speaking your truth become reckless when it involves other people's names? When does sharing become enabling? And how many reputations have to be damaged before we admit that implication can be just as destructive as lies? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this if you believe the internet needs to slow down before turning speculation into verdict. And remember this the next time an expose goes viral without evidence. Silence doesn't mean guilt, confidence doesn't mean truth, and not every story deserves to be told the way the internet tells it.